You think you know the story of Jack and the Beanstalk. A poor boy, a bag of magic beans, a vine that climbs into the sky, a golden hen and a giant, a chopped down stalk, the end. But what if this wasn't just a bedtime fable? What if it was a fragment of something far older? A broken shard of a myth that stretches across centuries, etched into the stories of gods and giants, monsters and men, echoing from the stone halls of ancient Mesopotamia to the shores of Celtic legend. What if Jack's tale wasn't about bravery or mischief, but trespass? Because beneath the familiar beats of the fairy tale lies a pattern, a hidden narrative shared across continents, a story where the villain might not be who you think, and the so-called giant might be the last guardian of something sacred. Welcome to Vortex Mythology, where we unearth their forgotten roots. Subscribe if you seek the ancient, the eerie, and the echoes buried in myth. Because this is far from just a fairy tale. Let's find out. Jack lived in hunger, a boy from a crumbling world, with nothing left but a cow and the hope of trade. When he went to the market, he returned not with food, but with 5 beans. Strange ones, smooth, too smooth. Their skins shimmered faintly. One pulsed at night, like a heartbeat under skin. His mother, seeing madness in his eyes and hunger in her bones, cast the beans aside, and that night they rooted. By morning, they had become a stalk, not a plant, but a structure, thick, twisting, and alive, reaching beyond the clouds with a force that didn't simply grow, it ascended, as if climbing back to where it came from. Jack climbed. Above the sky, there was no heaven. There was a stone castle in the clouds, huge, cold, and silent. Its corridors whispered. The air shimmered with strange pressure, and in the halls, echoes rang in a language Jack couldn't place. Words that weren't quite sound. Something no longer alive. He met the giant's wife, a towering woman with a kind face. She fed him and hid him, but her kindness trembled when her husband approached. The steps came first, like drums in the bones of the earth. Then the voice. Fee, fi, fo, fum. It shook the walls. It wasn't English. It wasn't gibberish. It was something else. Jack fled and stole a bag of gold. On his return visits, he took more. A hen that laid golden eggs. And finally, a harp that sang on its own. When Jack touched it, it vibrated, like something remembering who it used to serve. On his last escape, the castle groaned awake. The harp screamed like something being torn from its home. The giant thundered behind him, shaking the stalk from root to sky. The clouds darkened, and the wind turned wild. Jack reached the ground, and he didn't look back. He grabbed the axe. The first chop rang out like a warning. The second made the stalk shudder. With the third, it cracked. The giant was still climbing, hand outstretched, but too late. The beanstalk split, and the sky swallowed him. And that, they say, is the end. But was it really? Because something about this tale doesn't feel complete. It feels broken, as if something sacred was cut down, and all we've been left with is a child's version, one told by the victor. Most of us know Jack through the 1890s version, retold by Joseph Jacobs, or the earlier printed story from Benjamin Tabart in 1807. Both framed Jack as a clever underdog, a poor boy who outwitted a cruel giant. It fit Victorian ideals, morality tales where the righteous are rewarded and the greedy punished. But the truth is, in many older variants, Jack is no hero. In some tellings, he lies, steals, and kills. He crosses into another realm and takes without asking. Was this justice, or something more selfish? There are no golden morals, only golden loot. And what about fee, fi, fo, fum? Often dismissed as nonsense verse, it may actually be the fossil of a lost language. Linguists have drawn connections between these rhythmic syllables and Proto-Celtic chants. In some older dialects, it may translate to something like, "I smell the blood of a mortal man," or even more ominously, "I sense the trespasser's soul." And then there are the beans. Even the ancients treated beans with caution. To them, they were more than food, something sacred or dangerous. Yes, that's a little hard to digest. Eating or even damaging a bean meant disrupting the cycle of rebirth. So if Jack's beans were indeed magical, maybe they weren't just enchanted. They could have been something else entirely. When Jack planted them, it wasn't life he called up. He might have raised the dead. The story doesn't stop with Jack, because the farther you look, the more giants you find. In the Bible, David slays Goliath. One boy, one stone, and an old world falls. In Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus blinds the Cyclops Polyphemus and flees, as a trespasser escaping justice. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the king kills Humbaba, guardian of a sacred forest, and the land mourns. Balance shatters. The pattern repeats across centuries and across cultures. In Norse myth, the Jotnar ancient were beings, not any monsters. They are older than the gods, keepers of time and chaos. The Irish Fomorians, giant rulers displaced by newer gods. In Hindu epics, Beings like the Asuras and Daityas share divine roots, cast down not for evil, but for rivalry. Even in North America, legends tell of the Saitika, red-haired giants who were hunted not for crimes, but for guarding something others wanted. Different names, different lands, but always the same arc. A hidden world, a powerful guardian, a sacred object, then a younger figure, bold or reckless, arrives, takes what they shouldn't, and breaks the balance. The intruder wins, the guardian falls, and the world shifts just slightly. And in Jack's version of this mythic pattern, that connection between realms was real. And what was at the center of it all? The beanstalk, the bridge, and the root that touched the sky. This all begs another question. What was the beanstalk? The answer isn't as simple, because this wasn't just a simple plant. It connected worlds. In nearly every ancient tradition, there exists the image of a world tree, a cosmic pillar that bridges the earth, the heavens, and the underworld. In Norse myth, it's Yggdrasil, the ash tree whose roots touch death and whose branches cradle gods. In Hindu cosmology, the Ashvatha tree connects time and creation. Its roots grow upward. Its leaves contain the verses of the Vedas. Among the Maya, the world tree was the Milky Way itself, its trunk rising through the center of the cosmos. In Siberian shamanic practice, a pole is raised during trance. Each rung represents a different realm. As the shaman climbs, they ascend through existence. And then there are the beans. The Pythagoreans banned their followers from eating them. What was the reason? Beans, they believed, absorbed the souls of the dead. Their roots intertwined with the underworld. What if Jack's beanstalk wasn't a ladder? What if it was a living axis mundi, a bridge between the worlds? What if Jack didn't just climb upward? What if he crossed between realms? And when Jack swung that axe, he didn't just bring down a giant. He cut the last thread, tying us to something ancient. Something we were never meant to forget. Jack's journey. Once you strip away the nursery rhyme charm, you start to see something deeper and something older. He doesn't just climb a stalk and find treasure. He crosses a threshold, enters a sacred space, and steals. And this pattern isn't just in fairy tales. It runs through the very bones of mythology. Prometheus stole fire from Olympus, stole the wisdom. He gave it to humanity, and for that, he was punished forever. Odin tricked the giants to steal the mead of poetry, the drink that gave words their power. Gilgamesh killed Humbaba, guardian of the sacred forest, and took the timber for his own. None of these stories end in triumph. They end in consequence, in pain, in change, in the burden of what was taken. But Jack climbs, steals, and kills. And somehow, he's the hero. No one questions it. No one really asks why the harp cried out, or why the hen kept laying gold like it couldn't stop. We never question what those things were doing up there, or what Jack actually took. Maybe the harp wasn't just an object. It was a voice, holding on to something sacred. And the hen? Maybe it wasn't meant to be wealth, but something alive. Something that should have been left alone. But Jack didn't ask. He just grabbed what he could and ran. Jack doesn't just steal treasure. He crosses a sacred boundary. Like Prometheus, like Odin, like Gilgamesh, he takes from the divine. But unlike them, he faces no punishment. Why? Or did we just forget what that punishment was? Maybe the stalk wasn't meant to be climbed. And maybe the real monster wasn't the giant at all. Maybe it was the trespass. We've always called him the villain, a greedy beast who lived above the clouds. But what if we were wrong? The giant lived alone in a silent castle, surrounded not by treasure, but by relics. A harp that sang without a player, a hen that never stopped producing. Not prizes, not possessions. They were burdens, bound to the world above. And the giant, he wasn't hunting. He was there guarding, watching, waiting for what we'll never know. In the oldest stories, giants, they are the first beings, the ones who held the world before gods claimed it. They guarded wild truths, chaos, time, death, the unknown, the things too powerful to tame. So when Jack swung the axe, he severed a connection, cut down the bridge, and ended something far older than himself. It always seemed that he won, but maybe that silence at the end of the tale was something breaking. Maybe the beanstalk wasn't just a way up. Maybe it was the last living link between our world and one that remembered who we used to be. And when it fell, it was the end of memory, the end of really knowing. And fee fi fo fum, they might have been the final words of a dying world, lost in rhyme. Jack and the Beanstalk was never meant to be just a fairy tale. And just like that, it's a memory, twisted by time and softened for sleep. A whisper of a world where the lines between hero and intruder weren't so clear. And the monsters weren't always the ones we were told to fear. Stories like this survive for a reason. They remind us that not everything we've lost was meant to be forgotten, and that sometimes the price of discovery is silence. So next time you hear the tale, ask yourself, who was guarding what? And what did we really cut down? Because Jack's story didn't begin with magic. It began with hunger. And it ended with silence. A silence that still echoes in the roots we severed. Thanks for watching. And if you believe myths have roots in something real, something deeper, give this video a like and subscribe for more untold truths buried in legend. Until next time, don't be afraid of what you might unearth when you dig a little deeper.